turn this on. It's recording.
So today, we want to inform you about the Space Needle. Being an architect isn't only about construction. It's about creating white spaces with small spaces. This is a quote from Yanni Yuan. This is literally and symbolically true about the Space Needle regarding to its unique design and its positive energy brought to the people in Seattle. Since many of us in the class are from Seattle or live in Seattle, it's very important to know about the history of the Space Needle, which is a symbol of Seattle. So we have a variety of sources that provide information for this speech, and these are really critical because the information based on the first source and the other sources comes from the official page of the Space Needle. And in addition to that, the second source comes from the licensed organization that cites all the history of the places, popular places around the world. So we have three main points today, and first we're going to discuss about the creators and the meaning behind the Space Needle. And secondly, we're going to discuss about the Space Needle facts. And finally, we're going to discuss about the positive effects that Seattle receives from having the Space Needle. So, every success story starts with a single idea. For the Space Needle, the architect Edward E. Carlson created that one idea on a napkin after being inspired by the Stuttgart Tower in Germany.
That's true. Okay, so like me said, Edward E. Carlson was the original artist that sketched the original drawing on a napkin. He was inspired by the Stuttgart Tower in Germany, and he created the idea for the 1962 World's Fair that was going to be hosted in Seattle. His idea was inspired by the fact that he wanted it to look futuristic and bring Seattle into the space age. John Graham and a team of 12 men. John Graham was the original designer of the Northgate Mall, which was the world's first shopping mall. And his team of 12 men had a hard time moving this idea from the napkin to the drawing board because of its unusual and unique design. The team only finalized the plans for the building a year and a half before the World's Fair was set to be held. The Space Needle was a major obstacle for the city of Seattle to complete because of that unique design. But it was well worth it because of this, the city of Seattle and because of this, the Space Needle is now a staple in the Seattle skyline. Now we will talk about the facts about the city or the Space Needle.
All right. So now we are going to be talking about facts. And as Elias mentioned, the Space Needle was built in 1962 for the World's Fair. At the time, the Space Needle was the tallest building west of the Mississippi River, and it cost about $4.5 million to build. But the fun fact there is the land that was built on was only sold for $75,000. So construction on the Space Needle started on April 17th, and it only took 1 year and 4 days to fully complete. And the main reason was for the opening of the 1962 Seattle Fair, which back then they called it the Century 21. Now this was a huge accomplishment because, once again, this tower is absolutely huge, and it only took 400 days, so many locals considered it as the 400th day wonder. Now looking at the architecture itself, it took a lot of time and effort. It actually took 467 cement trucks, an entire day to fill the whole foundation. The hole was approximately 30 feet deep and 120 feet across. And then as as well, this was the largest continuous concrete pour ever attempted in the West. Now, with the structure itself and what it's built with, they used innovative steel, which was required to raise the Space Needle. And the Space Needle is fastened to its foundation with 72 bolts, which are about 30 feet long in length. And the Space Needle would also feature one of the world's first revolving restaurants. Now, back then, the original name for the Space Needle was going to be called the Space Cage. Of course, they changed it back to the Space Needle. And the restaurant was also going to be called the Eye of the Needle, but they changed that to the Sky City, which as it stands now, at about 500 feet in the air. Now going back to more dimensions of the Space Needle, or the weight I should say, the foundation itself weighs about 5,850 tons, and there are 250 tons of reinforcing steel in the foundation alone. The Space Needle's concrete foundation goes underground approximately 30 feet, so it definitely has a strong structure, and the needle structure weighs over 3,700 tons. Now, the main reason it was built with this much weight was to make sure that it withstands tremors, natural disasters, mainly like earthquakes and tsunamis, and it actually has been recorded that the Space Needle has stood through over 90 mile an hour winds, and the Space Needle actually sways approximately 1 inch for every 10 miles an hour of wind. And once the Space Needle was completed, the foundation weighed just as much as the Space Needle itself, where they established the center of gravity just 5 feet above ground. Now, if you've ever actually been to the Space Needle and look up, obviously it's a really high distance, but there are approximately 848 steps from the bottom of the Space Needle to the top of the observation deck. And on any hot day, the Space Needle can actually expand to about 1 inch, depending on the temperature of the day. And now that we've gone over some fun facts, with the booming effects of the Space Needle, it has created many positive effects in the city of Seattle.
So moving on to those positive effects, the number one would just be the successful completion of the Space Needle. Like Jeff said, it only took 400 days, and this was actually record time, and no lives were lost in this process. This was a huge source of pride for the city, just because during 1962, obviously safety standards were not to what they are today, and ensuring everyone's safety was not necessarily guaranteed. But just in present day, it does bring a lot of visitors. Washington State itself offers many tourist attractions, but the Space Needle remains number one above Mount St. Helens, lots of fun little waterfalls, trails, all the ski resorts like Stevens, and Pike Place Market. It creates many celebrities have also visited here, such as Elvis, Bruce Lee, Vanna White, and Mike Myers. It also provides jobs, which obviously helps the economy. People, because of the restaurant, we must purchase things like food from the producers of the food and other products. And then also, we sell lots of like little touristy things. If you go to the little, like the shops there, like the shop inside, on the bottom floor of the Space Needle, they do have a lot of like, little trinkets you can buy as gifts and souvenirs. And also, one of the most prominent, the prominent employee, but he runs the restaurant. His name is Chef Jeff, a little tongue twister, and he is in charge of like all the menus and like what they serve. And the restaurant itself it's like there's a minimum pay to even get in, and then that doesn't include like the price of the meal on top of that. So it can be very expensive for adults. But all of this combined allows people to have great memories. When they visit Seattle, they know they can go to the Space Needle, and around the Space Needle they can find things like the Experience Music Project and the Seattle Science Center, which is great for kids. And it's also right next to Pacific Northwest Ballet, just from like a 5-minute walk away. And as it creates memories for people, it's not just tourists, but also, growing up here, it was part of not my necessarily daily sightseeing, but it was certainly weekly or monthly. Everyone here has seen it probably hundreds of times in their life since we're from here and grew up here. And it also, I know that personally, like my prom was there in my senior year of high school, and
I remember I think I was a freshman and saw someone's prom there, and there have been like wedding pictures there. It's just a great place, and it's an amazing thing to have in those pictures since it's such a unique structure. And as we wrap up the official positive effects, we're going to move into the conclusion.
So today we discussed about the creators and meaning behind the Seattle Space Needle. And then secondly, we discussed about the facts of the Space Needle. And finally, we discussed about the positive effects of the Space Needle to Seattle. And we found a quote by Edward E. Carlson, the creative design artist of the Space Needle, and he says, "It wasn't just building a building, it was building a structure that hadn't been done like this before." And such as that, we can see that the Space Needle is the symbol of Seattle, and the Space Needle is also a symbol of the Northwest as it helped the city to grow as it is today.